The Sanders family in the suburbs. Nestled in a quiet cul-de-sac on the fringes of Maplewood, Illinois, the Sanders family home stood as a testament to generations of subtle ambition and quiet resilience. The two-story colonial, its white shutters gleaming behind lilac bushes and a modest American flag waving on the porch, was often the first to catch a neighbor's eye during a leisurely evening stroll. It wasn't a mansion by any means, but it radiated stability, a sense of permanence that had held the Sanders clan through countless seasons of joy, hardship, and change. The Sanders household was a tapestry of personalities and histories. At its core were William and Margaret Sanders, the aging yet spirited grandparents who migrated from Ohio in their youth with dreams of raising a family amid the shade of maple trees and the lull of distant train tracks. William, once a high school principal, still read the local paper every morning and prided himself on his tomato plants, while Margaret found solace in quilting circles and the laughter of her grandchildren. Their son, Richard Sanders, now in his mid-40s, had managed to carve out a steady career as a civil engineer, spending long hours ensuring the safety of the roads that wound through their town. His wife, Linda, a warm and attentive woman known throughout the school district as Mrs. Sanders, the elementary art teacher, was the household's unsung glue. She championed family dinners every Sunday evening, insisting that 3 generations gather around the old oak table to share meals, stories, and the inevitable squabbles that came with them. But perhaps the most dynamic current in the Sanders home ran between Richard and Linda's 2 daughters, Amanda, the eldest by 4 years, and Emily, the younger sister. Even as children, the contrast between them was unmistakable. Amanda, with her dark curls and magnetic confidence, seemed effortlessly popular, class president by sophomore year, varsity cheerleader, the kind of girl who could light up a room just by walking in. She was meticulous in all things, from her neatly color-coded planner to the framed certificates lining her bedroom walls. Emily, on the other hand, was quieter and more introspective, a dreamer who found solace in sketchbooks and novels, her blonde hair often tucked behind an ear as she disappeared into the world of her imagination. Emily was the sort of person who noticed the small, easy-to-miss details. The trembling of the maple leaves before a storm, the uncertain smile of a new neighbor, the weary sigh in her mother's voice after a long week. Despite their differences, Amanda and Emily were inseparable as children. Summer afternoons found them building elaborate forts in the backyard or choreographing impromptu plays for the family, while winter nights meant whispered secrets in the dark, giggles muffled by shared blankets. Amanda was fiercely protective of Emily, and Emily admired her older sister with devoted eyes, longing to step into Amanda's shadow. It was a bond that, for years, seemed unbreakable, a blend of affection, admiration, and that peculiar rivalry unique to siblings. The Sanders world was one of PTA meetings, church bake sales, and 4th of July barbecues. Their neighbors described them as the perfect American family, perhaps a little old-fashioned, but admired for that very quality. Their house echoed with the sounds of piano practice and the dull thud of sneakers on the staircase, punctuated by the familiar tones of "Mom" and "Where's my backpack?" The family dog, a golden retriever named Max, completed the picture, his tail ever wagging as he lounged in sunny patches across the living room rug. Yet beneath the veneer of suburban harmony lay subtle tensions. The need to measure up, unspoken resentments, the shifting tides of family dynamics as the girls grew older. Margaret sometimes worried that the world was changing too fast for her granddaughters. Richard occasionally felt the weight of providing, and Linda sensed, more keenly than anyone, the silent ripples of competition and longing that ebbed and flowed between Amanda and Emily. For now, though, the Sanders home appeared unshakable, a safe harbor from the uncertainties beyond its fences. On the surface, theirs was a world stitched together by generations of tradition and hope. But as with all families, Time and circumstance would soon test the limits of their unity, setting the stage for joys and betrayals no one yet imagined. The first cracks appear. As Emily and Amanda moved from childhood into adolescence, subtle fissures began to form beneath the friendly surface of their sisterhood. It started innocuously enough, small betrayals masked as harmless teasing, slight disappointments brushed aside in the rush of family routines. In families like the Sanders, such shifts often go unnoticed at first, woven imperceptibly into the fabric of everyday life. Amanda, always eager to be at the center of attention, learned early on the power she held over her younger sister. When Emily returned home from her first school art show, excitement lighting up her face as she clutched a Best in Show ribbon, Amanda was the first to clap her hands and offer congratulations. Yet later, when Emily went to show her award to their parents, she found the ribbon missing, only to discover it displayed among Amanda's array of cheer medals, as if by accident. Linda gently scolded Amanda, who offered an innocent shrug and a quick apology, but the sting lingered for Emily long after the incident. These minor transgressions multiplied as the girls grew older. Amanda began borrowing Emily's favorite books and returning them dog-eared or not at all. When Emily's childhood diary, stuffed with sketches and secret dreams, went missing for a week, it resurfaced only after Amanda had shared one of Emily's drawings in art class, passing it off as a collaborative piece. The family laughed it off as a harmless misunderstanding, oblivious to the ache in Emily's chest. It did not stop at possessions. Amanda, with her natural charisma, had a knack for redirecting their parents' attention just as Emily was about to share a story, leaving her words hanging in the air. On the basketball court near their house, Amanda's friends would laughingly recount Emily's shy attempts at conversation, egged on by Amanda's good-natured but piercing humor. To Emily, her sister's laughter sometimes felt like a shield, warm and protective on the outside, but hiding sharp barbs within. Even during family gatherings, Emily grew attuned to the gentle power Amanda wielded over their shared history. At holiday dinners, Amanda retold stories, recasting herself as the confident heroine and Emily as the comic relief. Margaret and William, the grandparents, would shake with laughter at Amanda's impersonations, while Richard and Linda marveled at their eldest's gift for storytelling. Emily played along, smiling on cue, yet privately began to question the fairness with which their memories were being rewritten. Despite these slights, Emily's faith in her sister remained largely intact. She rationalized Amanda's actions as quirks, the playful antics of an older sibling who loved her in her own way. Emily confided in sketchbooks and poured her confusion into paint, rarely daring to voice her complaints out loud. If she felt a pang of injustice, she told herself it was simply the cost of sharing a life with someone as vibrant and accomplished as Amanda. Occasionally, Linda would notice Emily lingering in the hallway as Amanda accepted another award or basked in a round of applause. "You okay, honey?" she'd ask, and Emily would nod, forcing a smile. The truth was harder for anyone to see. Each small betrayal left a faint scar, slowly shaping the way Emily saw her sister and herself. The first cracks, then, arrived quietly but persistently. They crept into the Sanders home with the stealth of shadows at dusk, almost invisible, yet impossible to ignore once noticed. Beneath the warmth and bustle of suburban life, a subtle tension began to settle in, laying the groundwork for larger betrayals and more visible wounds. And while Emily still clung to trust, something essential between the sisters had begun to change. Setting the stage for heartache, neither was yet ready to confront. The boyfriend incident, a painful betrayal. By Emily's sophomore year of high school, the dynamics between the Sanders sisters, though still outwardly harmonious, had grown complicated with adolescence's new tensions and insecurities. For Emily, high school was both exciting and daunting, a world of possibility that felt just out of reach. Socially reserved yet quietly artistic, she found comfort and encouragement in the company of her boyfriend, David Miller. David was gentle and attentive, a junior with an easy smile and a knack for understanding Emily's unspoken words. Together, they shared afternoons sketching by the neighborhood pond, trading favorite music, and planning little adventures, their bond a rare pocket of safety and sincerity in Emily's evolving world. Amanda, meanwhile, had blossomed into the very image of high school success. She was a senior now, head cheerleader, homecoming queen contender, and the center of attention at nearly every school event. While Amanda had always been friendly towards David in the casual way of a big sister, something seemed to shift the fall Emily and David grew closer. Amanda's compliments became more fervent, her presence at Emily's side during outings more frequent, and her gaze lingered on David with an appraising curiosity. At first, Emily dismissed her concerns as jealousy or insecurity. She reminded herself that Amanda had always been the more outgoing sibling, drawing people in effortlessly. Yet, as weeks passed, she couldn't help but notice the way Amanda sought David's opinions on her outfits, laughed a little too brightly at his jokes, and found reasons to invite herself along when the couple had planned time alone. Their parents, delighted to see the sisters spending more quality time together, encouraged these joint outings, blissfully unaware of the mounting tension. Everything changed one chilly October evening, when the school hosted its annual autumn dance. Emily had bought a simple blue dress, chosen after much deliberation. Amanda, as if by accident, selected a near-identical one in shimmering silver. The night began, as expected, Amanda sweeping through the entrance on the arms of her friends, while Emily arrived softly with David at her side. But as the evening wore on, Amanda's presence became impossible to ignore. She seemed to orbit David, pulling him onto the dance floor, sharing old jokes, and effortlessly turning group conversations in her favor. Emily watched from the edges, her confidence draining with each shared smile and secret glance between her sister and her boyfriend. The final blow came late in the evening when Emily stumbled upon Amanda and David outside the gymnasium. David looked uncomfortable, his hands tucked nervously in his pockets as Amanda spoke to him in hushed, urgent tones. When Amanda noticed Emily, her expression barely flickered before she immediately looped her arm through David's and made a passing, offhand comment about showing him the best view of the stars. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and self-doubt for Emily. David grew distant, answering her texts and calls less frequently, his responses awkward and clipped. At lunch, he sat with Amanda's circle of friends more and more, offering little explanation beyond the vague excuse of trying to branch out. When he finally broke up with Emily a week later, his words were hesitant and apologetic. But the reasons were unmistakable. In the hallways, whispers spread quickly. Amanda and David had been seen together after track practice, walking home side by side, their heads bent close in quiet conversation. The betrayal was as public as it was private, and Emily felt each rumor as a fresh sting, the humiliation compounding the heartbreak. For Amanda, the affair was framed as an accident, a fleeting mistake that just happened. She insisted she never meant to hurt Emily, but her apologies rang hollow, lost in the undercurrent of her own self-justification. She and David soon became inseparable, their romance on display at school events, their laughter echoing through Emily's world as a constant reminder of all she had lost. The family, at first bewildered by the sudden shift, fell into a pattern of uneasy silence, unwilling to confront the glaring reality. Richard and Linda urged Emily to see the brighter side, suggesting that these things happen and that it's best to move on. Emily, meanwhile, retreated into herself. She buried her pain beneath layers of composure, determined not to let Amanda or David see her wounds. Nights found her up late, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation and wondering what signs she had missed. She filled her sketchbooks with heartbreak, painting silent images of loss and longing, the only outlet for emotions she could not speak aloud. Her appetite vanished, and her grades slipped, though she tried hard to hide it from her well-meaning parents, who mistook her withdrawal for the typical blues of teenage heartbreak. What stung most was not only the loss of her first love, but the dawning realization that, for the first time, Emily saw her sister not just as her protector or rival, but as someone capable of deliberate, profound betrayal. The wound ran deep, leaving Emily wary not only of Amanda's intentions, but of her own ability to trust the people she loved. If there was a silver lining, it was the strength beginning to harden beneath the pain. An ember of selfhood that, flickering weakly now, would one day kindle into something fierce and unbreakable. But for now, the pain was raw and constant, the echoes of Amanda's laughter, a daily reminder of the cost of misplaced trust. The first major fissure had formed, too wide to ignore, too deep to heal with easy apologies, setting the stage for betrayals yet to come, and for a reckoning that would ultimately remake both sisters' lives. Material gain. Stolen. The aftermath of Amanda and David's relationship left more than just emotional wreckage in its wake. For Emily, the blow had been both public and private, shaking the foundation of her trust not only towards her sister, but toward the very idea of family loyalty she had always treasured. As autumn faded into a cold, uncertain winter, subtle changes crept into the Sanders household. Amanda, triumphant in her new romance and school status, carried herself with an air of invincibility. Emily, in contrast, became quieter and more inward. But Amanda's appetite for victory, it seemed, did not end with her sister's heartbreak. Amanda had always held a certain sway over Emily, a mix of charm, dominance, and the invisible hierarchy that comes with seniority in sibling relationships. In the past, Emily found herself loaning Amanda cash for shopping sprees or pizza nights, usually with little expectation that she would ever see her money again. These small favors had long felt like part of the unspoken rules of sisterhood, irritating, perhaps, but harmless. However, after the boyfriend incident, what once felt harmless began to take on a different, sharper edge. The first sign came just before Thanksgiving. Emily discovered that the leather-bound journal her grandmother had gifted her, a prized possession where she kept personal writings and sketches, was nowhere to be found. After days of searching, she found it in Amanda's room, tucked under a pile of makeup bags. When Emily confronted her, Amanda laughed it off. "Relax, Em. I just needed something to doodle in while I was on the phone. Don't be so dramatic." There was no apology, only an unspoken dare in Amanda's tone. "Try and stop me." The incidents multiplied as the holiday season approached. Emily received a modest stack of birthday cards from friends and relatives, most of them containing small bills or gift cards. Within a week, several cards vanished from her desk. Amanda offered a coy shrug when asked about them. "Oh, did you really need another Starbucks card? I figured you'd share. Anyway, I can Venmo you later." The money never came. The sense of being quietly robbed chipped away at Emily's remaining faith in their sisterly bond. To their parents and grandparents, Amanda put on a charming front. She volunteered to help Margaret with holiday baking, took William's car for an oil change, and made sure to post every good deed on social media, her life carefully curated to project generosity and togetherness. Richard and Linda, stretched thin with work and holiday obligations, didn't question the growing discrepancies in cash or missing things. "You know how chaotic things get when the girls are both home," Linda would say, waving away Emily's concerns with a well-meaning but distracted smile. "Just keep better track of your stuff." It wasn't just money or gift cards. One Saturday morning, Emily found her favorite winter scarf missing, a gift from her childhood best friend, hand-knit in shades of deep green. She spotted it days later on Amanda's Instagram story, wrapped casually around Amanda's neck during a holiday shopping run. Emily left a simple comment. "Nice scarf." Amanda replied with 3 heart emojis and didn't mention it again. A week later, Emily's digital camera was nowhere to be found. It reappeared 2 weeks after that, the SD card wiped clean and the battery nearly dead. Amanda's sense of entitlement crept into bigger asks. She borrowed Emily's debit card just for a day and returned it after a week, having spent nearly $100 on what she described as groceries and stuff. When Emily protested, Amanda rolled her eyes. "You know I'll pay you back. I just forgot my wallet, and you know Mom never puts enough in my account anyway. We're family. Or did you forget?" Emily's frustration mounted in the privacy of her bedroom, her resentment silently boiling beneath a practiced, neutral expression. She stopped expecting to be paid back and adjusted her routines. She hid her valuables, changed the passwords on her PayPal account, and locked her bedroom door whenever she left the house. She winced at the realization that she could no longer be open or trusting in her own home, the one place that had always felt safe. Despite these precautions, Amanda always seemed 3 steps ahead. She charmed secrets out of their parents, how much Emily received in her summer paychecks, the brand of phone their father had promised to buy her, the details of a small inheritance left from a distant relative. When Linda handed Emily a check to help pay for new art supplies, Amanda found out about it within hours. That same week, Emily discovered that the art store had already put through a charge on her account. Amanda pretending to be Emily, just getting ahead for her little sister. Amanda's tactics became more brazen. On multiple occasions, she convinced Emily to co-sign for short-term loans at the local credit union or let her use Emily's good credit for a store discount, promising every time that it was just this once, always with an air of entitlement softening her voice, as if loyalty demanded sacrifice. Emily, exhausted, relinquished ground out of habit, but the cost grew heavier each time. During these months, Emily's inner landscape changed. She kept detailed records of what was missing and when. She started photographing her belongings, emailing herself banking statements, and keeping receipts in a folder hidden behind a row of textbooks. While Amanda continued to take, Emily quietly began to build a paper trail, a habit born not only out of self-defense, but out of a growing need to respect and assert her own boundaries. The tension between the sisters became palpable, though words about money or missing items never escalated into open conflict. Instead, Amanda became icier and more sarcastic in private moments, snapping at Emily for being so obsessive or warning her not to go narc over stupid little things. When the family was together, Amanda charmed the group, keeping everyone laughing, her confidence unshaken. Emily learned to smile for appearances, masking her anxiety and anger even as her world felt smaller, less safe. One night in early February, the conflict nearly erupted. Emily returned home to find Amanda hosting 6 friends in the living room, music blasting, pizza boxes strewn across the kitchen counter. She caught Amanda rifling through her backpack, searching for Emily's car keys. "I just need to borrow the car for an hour, Em. Don't be so selfish." Emily's restraint snapped. "Why do you always take things that don't belong to you? Can't you just ask? For once?" The scene ended with Amanda slamming a door and Emily alone in her room, the night heavy with words left unsaid. Afterward, Amanda carried on as if nothing had happened, but the wedge between them felt permanent. Emily noticed that Amanda avoided being alone with her, and their once frequent late-night talks dwindled to silence. Emily spent more time with her grandmother or at the library, searching for spaces where her belongings and her heart felt safer. Yet even in her frustration, Emily sensed a shift within herself. She realized that her willingness to forgive was not infinite, that boundaries were essential, and that trust, once broken, demanded more than empty promises and superficial apologies to rebuild. If Amanda interpreted Emily's caution as coldness or indifference, Emily no longer felt the need to defend herself against her sister's judgments. Instead, she resolved to be vigilant and, when necessary, assertive. The months ahead would try these new defenses even more. Amanda's ambitions, unchecked, spiraled toward bigger risks and deeper betrayals. But for Emily, the lesson was clear. Survival in a house where love could be turned into leverage meant no longer playing the role of willing victim. She would watch and wait, and when the time came, she would be ready. Career destroyed. The ultimate betrayal. In the years following her final bitter break with Amanda, Emily poured all her wounded resolve into rebuilding herself. College in a neighboring city gave her a chance at distance, and then, almost unexpectedly, her passion and discipline landed her a coveted position as an assistant curator at a small but respected local museum. For the first time in years, Emily felt a sense of arrival. She worked late, organized outreach programs for local schools, and earned gentle praise from her boss, Ms. Kramer. Her small apartment was filled with stacks of art books and the smell of fresh coffee. A grown woman's life painstakingly built from scattered pieces. Amanda, meanwhile, drifted between jobs and relationships, her earlier high school charisma fading into a pattern of restless ambition and short-lived friendships. Still, Amanda's pride would not allow her to appear adrift, especially to the family. She resented the way her parents now looked to Emily with quiet pride, or how her grandparents spoke with admiration of Emily's stable job. Amanda's own setbacks, failed sales jobs, a brief stint at a car dealership, an unremarkable resume, were politely ignored at dinner, but the family's gentle tact only deepened her bitterness. The wedge that had once been private between the sisters grew into something the entire Sanders household tiptoed around. Holidays brought togetherness, but also the undercurrent of tension and silent calculation. Emily remained guarded, keeping her conversations with Amanda polite but distant. Amanda, wounded, grew skilled at hiding her envy behind stories of new opportunities and borrowed confidence. It was during this fragile period that Amanda reconnected with an old friend from high school, Calvin Reed. Emily remembered Calvin as a sharp, ambitious guy with a glib tongue and a knack for sniffing out shortcuts, especially at other people's expense. Calvin appeared one night at a local bar Amanda frequented, boasting about his recent job in a private investment firm, never mind the rumors of shady dealings that trailed him. Amanda saw in Calvin both opportunity and leverage. Soon, she wove herself into his orbit, attending office parties and sometimes bringing stories of Emily's tiny triumphs, always laced with a hint of mockery. Calvin, for his part, was bored by Amanda's stories until he learned that Emily worked at the museum. The museum was seeking sponsors and hosting a small exhibition featuring work from emerging local artists, a rare intersection between art, publicity, and potential investment. Amanda, sensing her chance to one-up Emily and perhaps secure Calvin's favor, concocted her plan. It began with innocent questions. "Hey, Em, I heard your museum's next show will be a big deal. Are you the one who picks the artists?" Emily, wary but eager not to alienate her family, explained her administrative role and her hopes for the fundraising campaign. Amanda listened keenly, then pressed further. "Do you deal with donors directly, or is it all through your boss?" Emily, not thinking much of it, shared some details. Nothing confidential, but enough to craft a story. In the following weeks, Amanda slipped Calvin enough information to let him stage a meeting at the museum under the guise of a private investment. Calvin arrived, smooth-talking Miss Kramer and the board, hinting at lucrative donations and promising press connections. He seemed interested in supporting the museum's mission, on the provision, he said, that he could bring in his own art experts to streamline acquisitions and publicity. Behind the scenes, he quietly solicited Emily's help preparing background material, suggesting that the more flexible she was, the likelier he would go through with sponsorship. The museum was small. It ran on trust and local goodwill. Ms. Kramer was intrigued but cautious, and she relied on Emily for much of her due diligence. That was when Amanda played her hand, using information gathered from conversations at home and a well-timed visit to Emily's apartment. Amanda accessed sensitive documents, donor lists, email drafts, and even confidential notes about internal disputes in the museum's leadership. At Calvin's suggestion, Amanda drafted a series of anonymous emails to Ms. Kramer, implying misconduct on Emily's part, conflict of interest, favoritism with certain artists, even leaking minor administrative errors that Amanda inflated into alleged fraud. The effect was devastating and swift. Ms. Kramer, blindsided by complaints and the suggestion of impropriety, confronted Emily for explanations. Although Emily denied all wrongdoing, the circumstantial evidence, emails, missing documents, whispered rumors, painted a damning picture. Calvin, ever the actor, played the part of the concerned yet impartial outsider, subtly urging the board to avoid scandal at all costs. Within 2 weeks, Emily was placed on leave pending investigation, her reputation in tatters. The humiliation was total. Rumors circulated in the tightly knit art community, and friends who had once admired Emily's talents now kept their distance, cautious and silent. The Sanders family was convulsed with shock. Richard and Linda were baffled, frantically calling lawyers. Margaret wept, convinced her granddaughter was the victim of a witch hunt. William retreated into angry silence. Amanda deflected blame, feigning ignorance and offering Emily hollow words of comfort in private, while subtly reinforcing doubts in the minds of others. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. You know how competitive the art world is. For Emily, the world grew small, sharp, and cold, her carefully crafted life dismantled almost overnight. Worse than the loss of her job was the sensation of being adrift in her own family, forced to doubt every conversation and gesture. At night, she replayed each memory, wondering precisely when Amanda had crossed from wounded sibling to active saboteur. She considered reporting to the police, but the case seemed built from suggestion and hearsay, the only hard evidence pointing back to her, planted there by the sister who once pledged never to hurt her. And yet, somewhere beneath the grief and numbness, Emily felt a flicker of defiance. The pain of betrayal had changed her. It was no longer enough to simply endure. She could not undo Amanda's schemes, but she could refuse to accept defeat. With deliberation, Emily began to trace back every step, reevaluating conversations, checking devices for evidence, retrieving deleted emails, and piecing together a chronology that made sense only in the harsh light of hindsight. Alone, but not yet defeated, Emily recognized that Amanda's betrayal was not only a personal tragedy, but a turning point. The family she had always hoped to protect was fractured, trust ripped at the seams. Now, finally, Emily found clarity. Forgiveness could wait. What she wanted first was the truth exposed, for herself and for anyone who ever doubted her. Emily rises. The secret plan. For days after her professional world collapsed, Emily was a ghost in her own life. She moved through her small apartment as if underwater, numb to the gray Chicago winter outside, ignoring worried texts from the few friends she still had. At first, she imagined the scandal would pass, that the truth would surface, the museum board would recognize her loyalty, and Amanda's role would remain hidden. But within a week, it was clear. Unless she took action, her career and her name might remain smeared forever. It started with fear, the paralyzing dread that every door in her life was abruptly, unfairly locked. But within the fear, something unfamiliar stirred. Anger, edged with the fierce determination of the wounded. Emily understood, finally, that endurance alone would not save her. She would have to become something she had never been before. Not just resilient or patient, but clever and quietly relentless. Her first step was secrecy. She spoke to no one about what she planned. She avoided her parents' urgent phone calls and Amanda's suffocatingly sweet texts, pretending to check in. The memory of Amanda's hug at the family meeting, the too long pause as Amanda whispered, "We'll get through this, Em," made Emily recoil. She could not bear another empty rehearsal of sisterhood. What she needed was proof. Emily began to retrace the timeline of her downfall. She dug through every device and account she'd used, searching for clues she might have missed when everything unraveled. Late at night, fueled by cold coffee and trembling hands, she stared at her old phone and laptop for hours. She found the forwarded emails Amanda should never have seen, screenshots Amanda had manipulated, and administrative documents that had vanished shortly after Amanda's last visit. It was small, technical inconsistencies that broke the surface. Date stamps wrong by hours, file names that matched Amanda's system instead of her own, and a faint watermark on an image that she discovered linked directly back to Amanda's rarely used email address. That was the beginning. Emily resolved to act methodically. She created a folder titled Redress on a hidden USB drive and began archiving everything. Suspicious emails, login history, Amanda's social media posts that coincided with her museum visits. She cross-referenced phone records, even finding an overlooked text from Calvin Reed to Amanda on the day the anonymous tipster reported her to Ms. Kramer. Emily downloaded secure recording software and began documenting phone conversations in case Amanda let anything slip. She called the museum's IT department, posing as a former employee concerned about possible identity fraud, and inquired about staff access to internal records. Every answer felt like a piece of glass, sharp and necessary for the case she was building. Rather than confronting Amanda, Emily watched from afar. The few times they crossed paths at family gatherings, Emily rehearsed the role of distant, weary daughter. She listened as Amanda, ever the actress, offered public protestations of support but subtle hints. I think Emily just wasn't ready for the responsibility. She takes things so hard. Not knowing that Emily was becoming expert in reading her sister's every calculated word. Outside her family, Emily did what she had always done best when faced with pain. She worked. This time, her work was solitary and secretive, an investigation and a battle for personal truth. She reached out to Anna, a college roommate and now a paralegal, under the pretense of asking about security breaches. Emily learned to request metadata from the files in question, printing out spreadsheets of file access history and IP addresses. She even paid for a cloud backup recovery service to retrieve deleted drafts that, astonishingly, revealed Amanda had logged in remotely using a shared family computer. Meanwhile, each night Emily chronicled her journey in a new journal. Not the one Amanda had once stolen, but a simple, unmarked notebook she kept inside a locked drawer. In it, she mapped her emotional territory as much as her investigative plan. The anger that made her want to demolish every memory of Amanda. The guilt that flared whenever she saw her grandmother's frail hope for reconciliation. The flickers of self-doubt that only fed her resolve. Throughout those months, Emily's world narrowed but also clarified. She pared away the relationships that had wilted under suspicion, kept her circle tiny, and focused on her goal. She learned, slowly, to stop blaming herself for Amanda's actions. In isolation, her boundaries hardened. Her sense of self became less about what others expected and more about what she demanded of herself. Each small victory, one audio clip of Amanda gaslighting her for being so obsessive, one piece of digital evidence matching Amanda's login credentials, was a stone in the wall she was building between herself and the quiet, trusting girl she used to be. The pressure mounted as Emily's collection of evidence grew. Sometimes she feared she would snap under the weight of it. Alone at midnight, staring at the endless scroll of exported emails, her mind darting between memories of shared childhood forts and the chilling realization that her greatest threat had always been sleeping in the next room. But now, she forced herself to stay present. "Not this time," Emily whispered to herself on the nights when her hand shook. "This time, I will not look away." By early spring, the outline of Amanda's betrayal was as clean and cold as the icicles still lingering on the eaves outside Emily's apartment window. She had the digital receipts, the manipulated files, the text conversations with Calvin Reed, even a saved voicemail from Amanda boasting to a friend about fixing a little problem at Emily's work. Emily contacted an employment attorney who advised her to continue gathering evidence quietly and to keep logs of every development. It would be weeks before she'd have enough to confront Amanda publicly, and longer still before she would bring her family and the museum board into the light of truth. But for the first time since childhood, Emily felt an unfamiliar strength fill her. Not just survival, but strategy. She was no longer waiting for others to rescue her, or for her innocence to be believed by default. Her dignity, her future, these would be reclaimed on her own terms. In silence and solitude, Emily became her own advocate. She knew that when the time came, her secret plan would not only clear her name, but begin the difficult, if painful, work of healing the fractures her sister's envy had carved into the heart of their family. For now, she waited, vigilant, patient, determined. The reckoning was coming, and Emily would be ready, not only to fight, but to win back her place in the world. Amanda's dream collapses. The truth. Exposed spring in Maplewood felt paradoxically hopeful. A season for renewal. And yet, for the Sanders family, it loomed with tension. The invisible fault lines that had run through their lives finally began to quake. Emily, bolstered by months of quiet investigation and mounting evidence, knew the moment for action had come. But she carried her plan with the gravity of someone who understood its cost. Beneath vindication, there would be fallout that could never be fully mended. It began with a single-family dinner. Linda, weary after a long week, insisted on a gathering to clear the air after months spent dodging awkward silences and sidelong glances. The oak table, once a place of laughter, art projects, and shared secrets, felt colder now, as if it sensed the storm about to break. Amanda, as always, arrived late, all breezy smiles and small talk, swiping away messages on her phone and charming William and Margaret with stories of imagined new prospects. Emily watched her sister with a detached kind of sadness, seeing Amanda's confidence for what it was. Brittle performance. Across the room, her mother's eyes kept darting between the sisters, her father retreated behind his newspaper, and even Margaret fidgeted with her napkin, anticipating a confrontation long in the making. When everyone had gathered, Emily quietly asked for their attention. Her voice, for once, did not waver. "I need you all to listen, really listen," she began. The room stilled. Amanda, sensing the shift, leaned back in her chair with forced nonchalance, but her eyes narrowed in apprehension. Emily produced her evidence, the carefully collated files, the timeline of digital footprints, the metadata, the recorded voicemails, and screenshots of Amanda's correspondence with Calvin Reed. With steady hands, she laid it all on the table, figuratively and literally, connecting each detail with measured, irrefutable logic. She explained how Amanda had accessed confidential files, orchestrated rumors, and coordinated attacks on Emily's career using insider knowledge only a family member could have exploited. At first, Amanda reacted with practiced indignation. "This is insane. She's obsessed. She's hated me for years. Can't you all see it? But as Emily patiently pulled up data showing Amanda logging into the museum's network from a familiar family device, displayed the text chains arranging sabotage, and finally produced the audio in which Amanda joked casually about cleaning up Emily's mess, the room's energy shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to a cold, somber clarity. Margaret's hands shook as she leafed through printouts, tears clinging to her eyes. Linda turned pale, her disappointment almost physical. William's jaw set visibly, a rare show of anger from a man who had always preached forgiveness. What followed was a chorus of reactions. Linda's gentle, shattered voice, "Amanda, why would you do this to your sister?" mingled with Richard's terse, furious demand for honesty. Amanda, for the first time since childhood, lost her composure entirely. Her denials faltered, her voice trembled, and the years of deflection gave way to a raw panic. She blamed Calvin, accused Emily of baiting her, and then resorted to pleading. "Okay, maybe I made mistakes, but Em was always the favorite after I left home. No one cared what I was going through. Don't I deserve something too?" she cried. But the sympathy she craved was gone. The facade Amanda had so carefully built, confident, generous, successful, crumbled before the relentless light of truth. The family meeting became a reckoning. Linda wept openly. Margaret spoke softly of kindness and repentance. William said almost nothing, only fixing Amanda with a gaze both mournful and unyielding. Even Richard, usually quick to mediate, struggled to contain his heartbreak. The siblings' once sacred circle was breached. Amanda's confession, when it finally came, unraveled in halting, incomplete sentences. Her fear of irrelevance after high school, her envy of Emily's steady progress, her desperation not to be outshone. Emily listened to her sister, feeling the familiar ache of wanting to forgive, even as another part of her recognized the importance of drawing boundaries. The damage was too great for easy repair. The fallout spread quickly to the family's wider circle. News of the truth, filtered carefully at first, then circulated openly, reached friends, church acquaintances, even the board at the museum. Those who had once scoffed at Emily's overreaction were silenced by the clarity of her evidence. Ms. Kramer, her voice cracking with regret, apologized to Emily and admitted the error in judgment. The worst wound, that of having her name doubted by her professional community, finally began to heal. For Amanda, the collapse was total. Job opportunities evaporated. Calvin Reed, his own reputation now tainted by the scandal, vanished without a trace. Former high school friends unfollowed Amanda online, and her carefully edited social media persona could not withstand the confrontation with reality. The local community, once charmed by her apparent charisma, now pitied her, or in some cases, distanced themselves altogether. But the personal consequences were even more profound. Amanda's world shrank and quieted. Isolation pressed in as she navigated the daily consequences of her actions. Awkward conversations with relatives, the sting of recognition in public spaces, the realization that her family's trust, once bound up in tradition and nostalgia, would not return easily. Meanwhile, Emily found herself transformed by the ordeal. In sharing her evidence, she had not sought revenge, but renewal. The hurt remained, but there was relief in disclosure, in finally being seen not as the resentful sibling clinging to the past, but as someone who had endured, gathered strength, and spoken the truth. She felt traces of compassion for Amanda's unraveling, but was clear-eyed. Forgiveness would be a process, not a gesture. For the Sanders family, the night finished in silence, as the truth lingered in the living room like dust catching the last of the sunset. Margaret hugged Emily and whispered, "Your strength is the hope of our family." Richard and Linda exchanged exhausted but grateful glances. William, only then breaking his silence, offered both daughters a final, solemn warning. In this house, we heal by facing what we are, not by hiding from it. Amanda stayed behind as others drifted away. For the first time, she asked Emily, not for forgiveness, but for understanding. Emily, her voice softer than it had been in months, answered honestly, "I hope you find peace, Mandy. But it has to be built on truth, not on someone else's pain." In that fraught, tearful night, the Sanders family stepped over the threshold from denial to honesty. Though the future's path was uncertain, something fundamental had changed. The truth, once feared, now glimmered as the only ground sturdy enough for anyone to stand on. Dialogue, tears, and forgiveness. After the shattering revelations that night, the Sanders family home was heavy with silence. What had once been a safe harbor now felt unsettled, as if every room echoed with the words that couldn't be taken back. For days, members of the family moved quietly. Margaret tending her garden in the chilly morning, William sitting for hours on the porch in deep reflection, Richard and Linda shuffling through chores with haunted eyes. Amanda mostly kept to her room, blinds drawn, while Emily withdrew into the attic studio, her once comforting sketchpad now filled with restless, unfinished lines. But silence, Emily knew, was only temporary, a pause before the real work of healing could start. Linda, sensing her daughter's mutual torment but lacking the words to bridge the gap, proposed a meeting one Sunday night. Unlike the fraught confrontation days before, this would be just the sisters, their parents, and their grandparents, a small gathering with the explicit hope for honest conversation, not accusation. The evening arrived with tension threading the air. Margaret baked lemon bars, the sharp citrus scent an attempt at comfort. William set the dining table with care, a quiet talisman to gentler times. The family gathered in the living room, no one quite willing to meet another's gaze. It was Amanda who spoke first. Her voice was rough from days of weeping. "Thank you for being here." She looked at Emily, her words trembling. "And thank you for not giving up on me entirely." The vulnerability in her tone, so absent in years past, stirred something in Emily, a painful sympathy mixed with wary resolve. Amanda took a deep breath. "I know I ruined a lot. I can't pretend I understand fully why I did every terrible thing, or that I can justify them. But I think a part of me always thought if I just got ahead for once, the world would feel right, like it did when we were little and nothing hurt. But it never did. And I kept trying, and I ended up hurting you all, especially you, Emily." Margaret dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, while William watched Amanda with a stern, wounded dignity. Richard and Linda sat side by side, their hands clenched tightly, painfully aware that nothing about this evening would be easy. Emily replied quietly, "I won't lie. Some days, I wasn't sure if I'd ever want to speak to you again. Everything you took, David, my things, my reputation, all of it, it made me smaller inside, like I wasn't safe being myself. I kept hoping you'd see me as a person, not just a rival or someone to use. That hope didn't protect me, but it kept me from hating you." There was a long pause. The entire family seemed to exhale, the tension thinning, but not disappearing. "I am so sorry," Amanda said, her voice cracking as tears slid down her face. "For not being a better sister, for letting my envy drown everything else. You didn't deserve it. Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa. I'm sorry for lying to you, for making you doubt Emily. I know an apology doesn't erase the damage I've done." Linda's voice was thick with emotion. "Amanda, we raised you both to love each other. I wish we'd seen the signs sooner. We can't undo the past, but we have to decide how to move forward. Richard looked to Emily. Is forgiveness possible for you? Emily gazed at Amanda, searching her sister's face for sincerity. What she found was desperation, remorse, and, beneath that, the broken outlines of the big sister she'd once idolized. Forgiveness isn't about pretending none of it happened, Emily said. I can't forget, and I won't just let myself get trampled again. But I can try to let go. Not for you, but for me, for all of us. I deserve to feel free of this, to hope for something better. Amanda covered her face, sobbing openly. Margaret crossed the room and wrapped Amanda in a trembling embrace, whispering, It's not too late, sweetheart, if you own your mistakes and stay honest. William nodded solemnly, his old, stoic words gentle. Redemption starts with truth and humility. The rest takes time. Linda moved next to her daughters and for the first time in months, put her arms around both. We are family, however flawed. We choose, every day, whether to heal together or drift apart. I hope you both choose healing. Silence again, but this time it was softer, almost a caesura in music rather than a rupture. Amanda addressed Emily, her voice barely audible. I want to try to earn back your trust, even if it takes a lifetime. Emily nodded, holding back tears, and offered a quiet, We'll see, but I'll try too, if we can promise to be honest, even when it hurts. Margaret looked up, her voice trembling with wisdom. Forgiveness is not a single act, but a practice. We'll all have to learn it, together. That's what makes us a family. The evening closed not with a grand resolution, but with slow, heartfelt acknowledgments of pain. One by one, the family shared their grief, regrets, and hopes, a tapestry of confessions and small comforts. William finally told Amanda, You are not beyond redemption. What you do next will matter more than what you've done. When the lemonade and tea were finished, Amanda offered to help clean up, and for the first time in years, Emily let her. The gestures were awkward, the forgiveness imperfect and incomplete, but something real had shifted. A willingness to try, again, to rebuild what had been broken. Upstairs that night, Emily wrote in her new journal, Forgiving someone else is, in the end, letting yourself become whole. I may never fully understand Amanda, but I am shedding the pain she gave me. It is not forgetting. It is becoming free. Below, Amanda lay awake, haunted but, at last, willing to face herself honestly. She knew restoring trust would be the work of years, and that some wounds would leave scars. But in the quiet, with her family still under the same roof, Amanda found the smallest flicker of hope. Maybe, slowly, she could make things right. In the house where so much had been broken, tears had become the seeds of tentative forgiveness. And though nothing could ever quite return to what it was, the Sanders family had begun the long, slow, beautiful work of becoming whole. Again, starting over, rising from old wounds. For weeks after their family's painful reckoning, it seemed as though time moved in slow, tentative pulses at the Sanders home. Though words of forgiveness had been spoken and tentative gestures of reconciliation made, the cracks in their foundation were still visible. Faint lines, but traces of old wounds nonetheless. Emily, however, sensed something had shifted inside her. No longer did the sight of Amanda's door closed in the hallway fill her with the old dread or resentment. Instead, it occasioned a deep, necessary peace, the knowledge that she could at last begin her own restoration. Emily took her first steps toward rebuilding her life gently, almost as if handling a fragile heirloom she wasn't sure she could salvage. Her return to the world outside the family home began quietly. She started spending afternoons at the public library, using their computers to update her resume and craft applications for museum jobs throughout Illinois and beyond. The weight of her previous dismissal lingered, but in her cover letters, she described her departure not as a mark of shame, but as the beginning of her search for an environment rooted in trust and artistic integrity. For the first time, she saw her scars not as evidence of defeat, but as quiet badges of resilience. Support came in unexpected forms. Margaret, her grandmother, left little notes of encouragement on Emily's bedside table, simple lines in looping cursive. "The only way out is through, sweetheart," or "The world needs your gentle eyes." William, whose stoicism rarely gave way to overt affection, began offering Emily rides to job interviews and surprising her with cups of coffee just the way she liked them, strong, with a hint of cinnamon. Within the house, small but significant changes unfolded. Richard and Linda, once caught in the crosshairs of the sisters' rivalry, became more attentive parents, active in their listening, deliberate in reinforcing boundaries and fairness. There were still awkward moments, instances when old anxieties surfaced or misunderstandings threatened to spiral. Yet instead of falling into patterns of denial or pretense, the family spoke openly, sometimes haltingly, about their fears and needs. "We can't erase what happened," Linda admitted one night over dinner, "but we can learn to take better care of each other now." Amanda's journey out of the ruins of her own making was, if anything, harder, slower, and lonelier. Stripped of the old comforts of denial and external validation, she floundered for weeks, wrestling with guilt, shame, and the discomfort of facing herself honestly. She took a job at a local bakery, a far cry from her dreams of glamorous careers or effortless popularity. But the routine, rising before dawn, learning to work quietly alongside others, serving customers with a humility she'd never known before, began to change her. On her days off, she volunteered with a community outreach program, discovering the restorative power of giving without expectation. For Emily and Amanda, rebuilding trust was not some grand catharsis, but a gradual, halting process. Early attempts at conversation often fizzled, awkward, tense, punctuated by apologies and awkward silences. But over time, the sisters found new ground, cautiously learning how to coexist as separate, evolving people rather than adversaries bound by old scripts. Emily set boundaries, tracking her personal items, insisting on financial independence, making it clear that cooperation would only come with respect. Amanda, for her part, honored these boundaries without protest, her contrition quiet and persistent. Outside the home, Emily found solace and validation through her craft. She returned to painting in earnest, reworking her old compositions into bold abstracts that captured both her pain and her hope. She shared her work at a small neighborhood gallery's open show. The exhibition was modest, but several visitors paused before her canvases, moved by the intensity and subtlety of her vision. When one piece sold, the first since college, Emily allowed herself to feel a flicker of pride, the affirmation that she was, indeed, finding her way back. Job interviews came with their own trials. Emily faced questions she dreaded, about the museum scandal, about what she had learned from hardship. She answered with candor. She told the story in her own words, admitting her heartbreak, but emphasizing her commitment to ethics and transparency. At first, rejections came. The professional world, like the personal, heals on its own timeline. But then, an opportunity arose. A small art center in Milwaukee invited her for an interview. The director, herself a survivor of betrayal in the nonprofit world, listened and nodded through Emily's story. "What matters," she told Emily, "isn't the mistakes people make around you. It's who you become once you've survived." Emily was offered the job a week later. The move to Milwaukee marked a decisive new beginning. Standing in her cozy apartment, boxes still packed, Emily felt the freedom of reinvention, the privilege she had long denied herself. She began each day with a new ritual, a solitary walk along the river or a trip to the art center's sunlit studio before staff arrived. She kept up weekly video calls with her family, sharing snapshots of her new surroundings, tentative smiles, and updates. Amanda, at first hesitant, sometimes joined these calls, never trying to dominate the conversation, but adding gentle, authentic observations that gradually became bridges rather than battlegrounds. Back in Maplewood, family life settled into a quieter and more respectful rhythm. Holidays saw the sisters reunited under the same roof. Emily less anxious, Amanda less performative. The old wounds did not vanish, but the ache of them softened. Mistakes, once weighted with shame, became shared lessons. Even William, once silent in his disappointment, remarked during one Thanksgiving, "We're never just the sum of our injuries. We're the sum of how we heal." With time, Emily came to understand the lessons encoded in her year of turmoil. She learned that self-respect and compassion are not opposites but twin pillars of lasting strength. She recognized that family, while imperfect and sometimes the source of our worst hurts, remains a foundation. Not because of its infallibility, but because of the courage to change and renew. Most importantly, Emily realized that forgiveness of Amanda, of her parents, of herself, was not an erasure, but an act of courage repeated each day. Standing before her studio window one golden evening, brush in hand, Emily watched the fading light play across the skyline. The wounds she bore had not made her less. They had carved out space for something new: wisdom, humility, and the persistent hope that even broken things could grow strong again when given the patience to heal. And with every painting, every careful step into her reclaimed life, Emily reaffirmed her truth, quietly, resolutely, beautifully, that she was more than her past, and she was finally, fully free. Closing the story. Peace after the storm. In the gentle arms of early summer, Maplewood shimmered softly beneath wide blue skies. The whir of cicadas, the golden haze in the evenings, and the scent of cut grass made each day feel like a quiet blessing. In the Sanders household, laughter once again drifted through open windows, lighter and less forced now. The shadow of past betrayals had not vanished, but it no longer clung so tightly to every conversation, or turned each gathering into a reckoning. This newfound peace, fragile as it was, had been hard-earned. Emily had settled into her new life in Milwaukee. Every corner of her apartment bore signs of her careful, hopeful labor. A hand-painted mug on the windowsill, dried wildflowers in a clay vase, sketches pinned beside the kitchen calendar. Her job at the art center kept her constantly engaged, surrounded by colors and young artists whose enthusiasm reinvigorated her own. She thrived in her role, not only organizing shows, but mentoring others, offering the kind of encouragement she had longed for herself. Colleagues remarked on her calm resilience. Friends, made slowly and deliberately, learned to trust her gentle wisdom. It was not a chapter defined by triumph alone. There were days of doubt, mornings when pain returned unbidden, when a careless comment or the sight of sisters laughing in the park pierced her with memory. But Emily did not retreat. She let those moments flow through her, accepting them as part of her healing. Each one, she realized, was a reminder of her capacity not simply to survive, but to grow. She kept up her art, finding in abstraction and color an outlet for all she could not voice. Sometimes she finished a painting and felt a deep and private joy. Sometimes she tore canvases up and began again, learning to find beauty even in her own frustrated attempts. Months slipped past, and with them, the last vestiges of shame. She belonged to herself once more. Conversations with her family gradually shifted. Weekly video calls, awkward at first, became easier. Margaret sent her long, loving emails with recipes and quotes from novels they had once read together. William asked, now and then, for pictures of her artwork, his praise understated but heartfelt. Richard and Linda, talking from their backyard framed by mature maples, freely admitted their ongoing struggles, their wish to get it right this time, and their pride in her courage. Amanda remained more circumspect, but her messages grew more honest and less apologetic, marked less by the need to explain and more by the intent to share. She spoke of humbling lessons learned at the bakery and the slow restoration of her own sense of worth, unmoored now from competition or approval. Slowly, the sisters redefined their relationship. There were no grand confessions or tearful apologies, just a series of small gestures, sharing a playlist, joking about childhood mishaps, quietly acknowledging the distance traveled. When Emily returned home for holidays, the atmosphere felt altered. Fewer things were left unsaid. Amanda never entered Emily's room without asking, and when she borrowed something, a book, a scarf, it was always returned with a note or a smile, and sometimes, now, a story of her own. The larger family reconciled with the truth as if approaching a fragile artifact, handling with care, discussing openly what once would have been hurried past. Margaret organized Sunday dinners with no expectation of attendance, letting the family find its rhythm again. Grace and gratitude, once hidden beneath layers of pride or pain, surfaced in everyday life. William fixing a squeaky door in Amanda's modest apartment, Linda helping Emily paint her living room, Richard asking, genuinely interested, how his daughters felt about everything that had come and gone. Outside the family, Emily's world continued to unfurl. The art center grew, its mission evolving to serve underprivileged youth, and Emily was asked to lead workshops on resilience and storytelling. She accepted, not thinking of herself as a sage or a survivor, but simply as someone who understood the slow road back from despair. Her story became less about betrayal, more about strength, empathy, and the choices we make in the wake of suffering. One sultry afternoon, Emily returned to Maplewood for her grandmother's birthday. The occasion felt quietly celebratory. The house had been decluttered of old hurts, childhood photos proudly displayed, a table heavy with home-cooked food, the garden bright with peonies. After dinner, the family gathered on the porch, the sky streaked gold and mauve as the sun set. Margaret, her hands folded in her lap, gently addressed them all. I have watched you all weather many storms. I see the lines it's cut into us, the ways we've changed, lost, and found each other. But I am grateful, deeply grateful, that we are here together, with more honesty and less fear. Amanda, voice soft, nodded in agreement. I regret so much, but I am learning every day. I know I hurt you, Em. I won't ask to be the sister I thought I was, but I hope I can keep trying to be better. Her confession was met not by silence, but by the sound of cicadas and the gentle squeeze of William's hand on her shoulder. Emily searched herself for bitterness and found only understanding. "We're not what happened to us," she replied gently. "We're who we decide to become now." She realized, in that moment, that forgiveness was not just an act, but a way of being in the world. She was, at last, whole. As darkness settled and the first stars appeared, the family drifted indoors, lingering over laughter and shared stories. Nothing was perfect. Old wounds sometimes ached in quiet, ordinary ways. But the atmosphere no longer bristled with tension or dread. They had not erased the past. Instead, they had built something sturdy atop its uneven foundation. Later, when Emily stood alone in the yard, breathing in the cut grass and summer air, she felt the subtle, astounding peace of having arrived somewhere new. She carried both scars and gratitude, aware that the road behind, as hard as it had been, had given her wisdom, humility, and hope. Peace after the storm, she knew, meant more than just stillness. It was the promise that joy could return, that trust could be rebuilt, that stories need not always end where they began. Looking up at the moonlit sky, Emily smiled, a secret, quiet affirmation that she and those she loved could start again.